When I opened that Bible and the note fell to the floor, I felt as if the whole world had stopped turning. It shouldn't have even been in my hands. That office was his kingdom, his thinking space, as he called it, and I was just the quiet little wife who was supposed to dust around his throne and never sit in it. But that Sunday, the migraine was drilling through my skull. The kids were at his mother's for lunch. Anthony had urgent bank paperwork before some big transfer. I was alone, half blind with pain, and I knew he kept strong pills in his desk. The door was closed, not locked. He trusted me not to cross that invisible line. He shouldn't have. The room reeked of his cologne, tobacco, and arrogance. Dark desk, leather chair, shelves of books he never read. I went straight to the top drawer, digging past pens and papers. A wave of dizziness hit. I grabbed the bookshelf to steady myself, and that's when it happened. The big leather Bible he liked to brag about tumbled down and hit the floor with a dull, accusing thud. It fell open. Something small and folded slid out and landed near my foot. I should have put it back. I should have respected his things like a good wife. Instead, I bent down, picked it up, and opened it with trembling fingers. 7 words. Just 7. If she discovers the truth, kill her. Edward's handwriting. The bank manager, Anthony's best friend. The man who toasted our anniversary and sent Christmas cards signed fondly, Ed. If she discovers the truth, kill her. My headache vanished. My body went numb. I dropped into Anthony's chair before my knees gave out. Was she me, some other woman? What truth, money, cheating, something worse? What exactly did 2 respectable men think justified killing a 29-year-old housewife who made perfect pot roast and ironed their damn shirts? 1,000 questions screamed in my head. Instead of answers, I had a scrap of paper that spelled out my possible murder. I refolded the note, put it exactly back between the Bible's pages like a snake sliding back into the grass, and set the book on the shelf. Then I found the pills, swallowed one, and lay on the sofa pretending to rest. When Anthony came home with the children, I was smiling. I served dinner. I laughed at his dull jokes. I kissed my kids goodnight. Outside, I was still the obedient Gertrude he thought he owned. Inside, something cold and sharp had snapped into place. I didn't confront him. Men who talk about killing don't get warnings. I watched instead. The way he locked his desk now. The way he hung up phones when I walked in. The way his eyes flicked to the Bible once as if checking it was still there. A week later, ironing his shirts, I found the next piece. A crumpled jeweler's receipt in his inside pocket. Not from our town, from Fairview City, and not for a modest trinket. Engagement ring, white gold, solitaire. 3 times the money he gave me for an entire month's expenses. He'd never bought me anything that expensive in 10 years of marriage. My wedding band was a thin circle of plain gold. And tucked with the receipt, a business card with a neat little address carefully written on the back. I put everything back where I found it, smoothed the fabric, finished the ironing. My heart ached. My hands did not shake. He had a ring. He had an address. He had a note that said, if she discovers the truth, kill her. The only question left was simple. How far was he willing to go, and how far was I willing to let him? Because in the next part, I follow that address and find out exactly who I've been replaced with. Would you have checked or kept pretending you didn't see a thing? The following week, I became a liar too. Not the way Anthony lied, with secrets and sneers and hidden tickets, but with smiles and excuses. I need special lace for a client, I told him, folding his shirts. They only carry it in Fairview. I'll take the early bus. He didn't care. A husband who plans your exit doesn't watch where you go. The first visit, I just walked the streets, learning the city. The second, I bought fabric I didn't need, just to keep my story tidy. On the third, I went hunting. The address from the card turned out to be a pretty little house in a respectable neighborhood. Painted shutters, roses climbing a trellis, a pram visible through the front window. A woman next door was watering her garden. People like her always know everything. Lovely place, I said casually. New to the neighborhood? Oh no. That's Miss Eliza's house, she chirped. School teacher, sweet girl, expecting a baby. Poor thing's been living alone except when her fiancé comes through on Thursdays. He works in another town, poor man. Stuck with an ex-wife who won't sign the papers. She smiled like it was a romantic tragedy. I felt my stomach drop. Thursdays, first Thursday of every month. The same business trips Anthony took. The same days I packed his shirts and shined his shoes and watched him kiss our children goodbye. The ex-wife who wouldn't sign? That was me, cooking in his house, washing his dishes, sleeping beside his body while his heart was somewhere else. I thanked the neighbor and walked away before I threw up on her roses. On the bus home, I stared at my reflection in the window. To everyone, I was Mrs. Miller, respectable, devoted, lucky. Inside, I was a woman whose husband was planning a new life with a pregnant schoolteacher and maybe planning to have me taken care of if I got in the way. The humiliation burned hotter than the fear. He'd used me like a maid, like a prop, like a background character. 10 years of my life, and I had become a disposable obstacle in his fantasy. Back home, the kids ran to the door. Mom, how was your trip? Lovely, I lied, kissing their heads, breathing in the only things in this world worth protecting. In the following days, I collected more threads. I ran into the new bank secretary, Lily, after church. Young, newly widowed, eager to talk, I played dumb. Anthony says the bank is so calm, I smiled. She snorted. Calm with that enormous factory transfer coming? Your husband and Mr. Edward live locked in that office. I've never seen so many zeros on a page. Transfer, factory money, late nights, Thursday trips, pregnant teacher, Bible note. The picture was no longer fuzzy. They were going to steal that money, disappear with it. Start over in some sunny place with their shiny new life. And me, best case, abandoned and ruined. Worst case, a body found in a ditch, people whispering, such a shame. She must have gone mad. Then I remembered the odd key I'd found months before in his shaving kit. When I'd asked, he'd snapped, old archive drawer, and snatched it back like I'd tried to steal his spine. Now that key itched in my memory. I waited until he left for work and the children were at school. Then I tore the house apart politely. Not in the desk, not in his coat, not in the lockbox. Finally, I found it tucked inside a fake book safe, laughably, a book about ethics. The key fit a small metal cash box jammed behind suitcases in the wardrobe. Inside, 2 tickets to Rio de Janeiro under different names. Fake ids, a handwritten plan in Edward's neat script, and letters from Elise. My love, just a few weeks until we can leave that suffocating town, one said. Edward says as long as your wife doesn't notice anything, we're safe. But if she does, you know what he said must be done. I sat on the floor, surrounded by evidence that my husband was a thief, a liar, and potentially a murderer. Then very calmly, I put everything back. If they wanted to treat me like I was stupid, fine, I would let them, for 2 more weeks. Because those 14 days would decide who walked away with a future and who walked into a cell or a grave. If you found a box like that, would you run or quietly start loading the gun of evidence like I did? Once I knew the shape of his betrayal, my fear turned into something harder. Strategy. He thought I'd scream or collapse or beg. Instead, I cooked his favorite stew, kissed his cheek, and stitched my own escape into every ordinary day. First, I needed money that wasn't his. I wish women could have their own accounts, I sighed to my wealthiest client, Mrs. Duart, while pinning her waist for a custom dress. Anthony says there's no need, he handles everything. She snorted so loud her pearls shook. Your husband's a banker, darling, of course he says that. Tomorrow you're coming with me to Fairview Savings. We'll open you something in your own name. Men don't need to know everything. And just like that, with one powerful widow's signature, I had a hidden account in another city. I deposited every secret coin from my sewing work I'd stashed over the years. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Next, evidence. On mornings Anthony left early, I slipped into his office. I had bought a cheap little camera in Fairview, fit in the palm of my hand, clicked silently. Every ledger page, every fake document, every ghost account got its moment in front of that tiny lens. Names of dead clients being used, numbers rounded strangely, transfers delayed and rerouted. 3 years of small thefts leading up to one huge heist, but photos could mysteriously disappear. Papers could be misunderstood. So I needed copies too. I went to the stationery shop under the pretense of making a surprise family document album for Anthony's birthday. Oh, Mrs. Miller, I shouldn't let anyone use the copier, the owner fretted. I smiled sweetly. It's just our marriage certificate, the children's birth records, he'd be so touched. I threw in a promise of a free dress for his wife, and suddenly I had crisp copies of the dirtiest documents that bank had ever seen. Evidence secured. Next, someone who would actually care. The sheriff played cards with Anthony. The judge baptized my son. The priest let Edward cry on his shoulder every week. I needed someone whose paycheck didn't depend on their smiles. Enter Mr. Navarro, the inspector from the capital who visited twice a year to audit the bank. Anthony called him that sanctimonious bastard, which meant he was perfect. Through Lily, the secretary, I learned Navarro would be in town right before the transfer. He always stayed at the only inn near the square. I couldn't be seen walking into his room. This town could turn even a knocked-over trash can into a scandal, so I used my daughter, not as a pawn, as a cover. Teresa had befriended the innkeeper's little girl at school. I arranged a playdate, dropped her off, and admired the innkeeper's handbag. "So lovely with this dress I'm making," I said. "May I borrow it to match the strap length?" "I'll bring it back later," she agreed, flattered. That evening, I returned the bag with an envelope hidden in the lining. Inside, copies of the documents, several photographs, and a letter that began, "To the inspector who still believes numbers should be honest." I did not sign my name. I just asked him to look at the transfers scheduled in 2 weeks. Last step, a future. If this worked, Anthony would be in handcuffs. The house was in his name, the job gone, the town poisoned. I had to be ready to leave. I wrote to my childhood friend Lena, who'd moved to the capital and run a tiny sewing room. "My marriage is ending," I wrote, half-truth. "Do you still need help?" Her reply came fast. "Bring your children, I have space behind the shop and more work than I can handle. We'll figure it out." So I folded clothes into a small suitcase under the bed. I tucked away documents, school records, a few precious photos, split cash into hiding spots around the house. On the outside, I baked pies. I cleaned. I listened to Anthony's fake yawns and his stories about long days at the bank. On the inside, I listened to the tick of the invisible clock counting down. 14 days until the transfer. 14 days until his escape or his downfall. 14 days for me to decide what kind of woman I would be, the corpse they'd planned, or the witness who lit the match. If you had 2 weeks before everything exploded, would you warn the man planning to kill you, or smile, serve his dinner, and wait for the sirens? The closer we got to the transfer, the stranger Anthony became. He snapped at the children, then bought them sweets they didn't ask for. He avoided my eyes, then stared at me at night like he was trying to memorize my face. Remorse, fear, calculation, I didn't care. It was already too late for him. The night before the money was due to arrive, he barely touched his food. "We'll have to postpone that Sunday picnic with the kids," he said suddenly, voice too casual. Something came up. The picnic was scheduled for the day after the transfer, the day he and Elise were supposed to vanish. "Of course," I replied, ladling more soup. "We can always go another time." Michael looked disappointed. Teresa played with her spoon. None of them knew just how close they'd come to never seeing him again. Later, I found him in his office, door half open, unusual, papers spread over the desk. Trap, maybe. "Anthony," I said softly from the doorway, "I need money for fabric. Mrs. Duart wants a new dress." He glanced up. For the first time, I saw it clearly. Fear, not for me, for himself. He pulled out his wallet and handed me more money than I'd asked for. "Buy something nice for yourself," he murmured, almost tender. A consolation prize for the wife he was about to discard or bury. That night he snored like a man who trusted his plan. I lay there awake, staring at the ceiling, counting heartbeats in seconds. At dawn, I dressed the children for school, plaited Teresa's hair, slipped an extra hug onto Michael's shoulders. Anthony gulped down his coffee, checking his watch every 2 minutes. "I'll be late tonight," he said. "Don't wait up." "Busy day?" I asked. "Just procedures," he lied, buttoning his jacket. Before he left, he kissed my cheek and hugged the children longer than usual. I watched his hands. I imagined those same hands signing fake documents and holding another woman's waist. When the door closed, I exhaled. Then I moved. Documents, gathered and hidden. 2 small bundles of clothes slid under the bed. Cash tucked into the lining of my coat. If things went wrong, if Anthony somehow slipped through or suspected me, I needed to be ready to grab my children and run without a backward glance. The day crawled. I did ordinary things with shaking hands, dropped the kids at school, bought vegetables, finished a hem. Mid-afternoon, Lily knocked on my door, pretending to adjust her dress. Her face was pale. "Mrs. Miller," she whispered while I pinned the hem, "men from the capital arrived with the transfer. The inspector is with them. Edward's locked in his office with 3 of them. Your husband tried to leave. They told him to stay." My heart hammered against my ribs. It was happening. When she left, I sat at my sewing table, staring at the machine as if it could tell me the ending. Hours passed. No phone calls, no knocks. The stew on the stove turned to glue. At 8 o'clock, I heard sirens. 3 police cars shot down the street toward the town center. I went to the window and held the curtain with fingers that didn't feel like mine. 30 minutes later, someone pounded on my door, not the police. My sister-in-law, Lucinda, wild-eyed, breathless. "Gertrude, haven't you heard? They arrested Anthony and Edward. They say they tried to steal the factory money. Everyone's in the square. It's a disgrace." I covered my mouth, staggered back, let myself sink into a chair. The shock on my face didn't need acting. It can't be," I whispered. "There must be a mistake." "No mistake," she said, closing the door behind her. "They found foreign tickets, fake names, a pregnant woman in Fairview, and a note in his office Bible. Something about killing you if you found out." I let real tears fall then, for my wasted years, for my children, for the part of me that had once loved that man. "The children," I managed. "They're asleep at your house?" "Yes, they're fine." "But you, what are you going to do?" I already knew. I'd spent 2 weeks planning exactly that. My husband was a criminal, a cheat, a coward willing to let someone kill her about the mother of his children. His life as he knew it was over. Mine, for the first time since my wedding day, it finally belonged to me. When the person who was supposed to protect you is dragged away in handcuffs, is that the end of your story or the start of a new one? The next morning, the town treated me like I was a ghost. Some stared with pity, some with disgust, like betrayal might be contagious. A few watched me the way people watch a car wreck, not because they care, but because they're bored. Lucinda wanted me to hide. "Stay inside," she begged. "Let it blow over." If I hid, they'd assume guilt or stupidity, or both. So I put on my best navy dress, pinned up my hair, dabbed on lipstick, and walked to the market like I wasn't the talk of every kitchen. Silence followed me aisle to aisle. It broke when the innkeeper's wife spoke up. "Mrs. Miller," she said loudly, "if you or the children need anything, you come straight to me, understood?" The break in the ice was enough. A few other women nodded. Not all. Enough. That small victory prepared me for the real battle, the capital. 3 days later, I sat on a bus, a small bag at my feet, my hands clenched around photos of my children. I was to give a statement. At the police station, 3 men waited, the inspector, a prosecutor, a clerk. "Mrs. Miller," the inspector said, "you're not under investigation. We simply need your account." Anthony and Edward, he explained, had siphoned funds for years. The factory transfer was supposed to be their masterpiece. "Did you know about this?" the prosecutor asked. "No, sir," I replied. "I discovered pieces by accident 2 weeks ago." I told them about the Bible, about the note, about the receipts, about Elise, the pregnant teacher. I did not tell them about the envelope I'd sent. Some things were mine. "What about the other woman?" I asked finally, unable to say her name. "She claims she believed your husband was divorcing you," the inspector said. "She's pregnant, 7 months. No evidence yet she knew about the theft." Jealousy should have burned. Instead, I felt something closer to tired pity. She too had fallen for his lies. As I stood to leave, the inspector stopped me. 2 weeks ago," he said quietly, "we received an anonymous package, documents, photos, very precise. Whoever sent it saved a lot of people from losing everything, including you." He held my gaze. I said nothing. "Whoever it was," he continued, sliding a card into my hand, "was very brave. If you ever need help, call me." On the bus back, watching fields blur into darkness, I made myself a promise. My children would not be defined by their father's crimes. I would drag us out of this mud if it killed me. In the following days, the consequences hit like falling bricks. We got notice to vacate the house. It was tied to the bank, and the bank wanted blood. I had to sit my children down and explain in simple words that their father had done very bad things and would be gone a long time. "Doesn't he love us?" Teresa asked, eyes wet. "This isn't about love," I told her, pulling her close. "This is about choices. Adults make terrible ones sometimes, but I am here, I am not going anywhere." Michael, quieter, just asked, "Can I see him?" "When it's allowed," I said. "When it's safe." At night when they slept, I packed our lives into boxes. I sold what I could. I wrote to Lena and told her we were ready. On the morning we left town, I stood outside that house, our prison, our stage, our lie, and felt nothing but a strange relief. Those walls had almost been my coffin. Instead, they were just stop number one on a road I hadn't chosen but would own from now on. The Bible note that should have been my death sentence turned out to be my warning flare. I saw it. I believed it. And instead of waiting to die, I rebuilt myself. So now I'll ask you the same thing I still ask myself some nights. If you opened a book and found proof that someone wanted you gone, would you crumble, or would you start quietly rewriting the ending like I did?